Honourable members, we will now continue with the response to His Excellency's address, and I call upon the Honourable Professor Biman Prasad. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to begin today by quoting my response to His Excellency's speech from 12 months ago. And this is what I said then, and I quote, "It is the custom when we rise to debate His Excellency's speech to this House to thank him for His Grace's speech. I do not doubt the grace with which His Excellency delivered his speech. But I wonder about those who wrote that speech. I wonder about how much respect they have for His Excellency's office. I wonder about how much respect they have for the people of our country," unquote. This year, Mr. Speaker, the position is exactly the same. Once again, I've looked at very carefully at His Excellency's speech of last week. I've looked at carefully for anything that could tell me that this Fiji First government has a vision or a plan or any idea about where it is taking our country. And the answer, Mr. Speaker, is nothing. No vision, no plan, zero. His Excellency's speech praised the government for containing COVID-19. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we have done well in this. The officials who have managed the border, our doctors and nurses who have treated the patients in Lotoka and Navua, they have indeed done well. And it is right to praise them for their efforts to keep our country safe from this devastating pandemic. They have done their jobs. Now the government must step up and do its job. It must honour the work they have done by building on that success, by rebuilding our economy and setting out a vision for the future. And it is these plans we were waiting for in His Excellency's speech. Of course, Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 was blamed for all Fiji's economic problems. After all, it is the government that writes the speech, and we all know, Mr. Speaker, that whenever this government gives us bad news, it's always somebody else's fault. Mr. Speaker, the speech mentioned the so-called COVID-safe economic recovery framework. I will come back to that. Of course, it had to talk about the so-called blue-green economy. It had to talk about climate change, net zero carbon emissions. In fact, there was talk of digitization. Very good. Lots of talk. But where is the action? Where is the action? As usual, there was a call on civil servants to be more efficient. But how can they be efficient when the government makes such inefficient laws and inefficient policies? Then, Mr. Speaker, there was one paragraph, and I repeat, one paragraph, on the government's legislative agenda for the year. There will be an anti-doping bill, there will be a refrigerants management bill, there will be a hotel data collection bill, and so on. And then suddenly, Mr. Speaker, His Excellency's speech was over. That was it. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because His Excellency's government, the people on the other side of the House, they have nothing to say. They have nothing to offer the people of Fiji. And this has been the pattern that I've seen, Mr. Speaker, for the last 3 years. For example, what did the speech say about agriculture? Zero, no plan. What did the speech say about sugar? Zero, no plan. What did the speech say about tourism, our largest industry? Incredibly, Mr. Speaker, zero, no plan. No plan. What did the speech say about manufacturing? Zero, no plan. What did the speech say about exports? Zero, no plan. Mr. Speaker, with all respect to His Excellency, his speech was a zero content zone. That is the speech his government wrote for him. Because we have a zero ideas government. Mr. Speaker, we are facing the worst economic crisis in Fiji's history. And unfortunately, we are led by the worst government in the history of Fiji.
Order.
They have spent all the money, and all, Mr. Speaker, they can tell the people of Fiji now, take out more out of your FNPF. That's what they're telling the people. They tour the country in the four-wheel drive motorcades, giving speeches of all manner of unimportant things, as if nothing is wrong, everything is normal. They turn up at school prize-giving functions. They will pop up at seminars and workshops. They even turn up to open shisha bars in Suba. They'll go anywhere that makes them look busy and important and good. But they will not visit people who have lost jobs and small businesses. They will not visit people whose incomes and lives have been wrecked by the coronavirus crisis. They will not stand by the 8 years workers who were all made redundant. The same workers who found the same jobs being advertised in the Fiji Sun the following week. They will not visit the COVID relief center in Nandi. They will not talk to the hundreds of distressed families who do not know where their next meal is coming from. Instead, they make new laws for the NGOs, Mr. Speaker, and charities. All the people who are doing work the government is supposed to be doing, and what do they say to them? We have passed a new law. If you do not file your accounts, we will deregister you. That, Mr. Speaker, is how this government treats all those people who are trying to help others. And why is that, Mr. Speaker? Because this government does not. They worry about being shamed about its inaction. It does not want to see all the ordinary men and women of Fiji who are doing good, who are doing their best to help their fellow Fiji citizens. Because the government itself, in my view, is doing nothing. What is the only thing they're doing? They're saying, take out more of your FNPF. This government, Mr. Speaker, wants all the credit for all the good things that happens. If someone else who is doing good things, they are a political threat. Mr. Speaker, this is the level of pettiness, small-mindedness to which our government has descended. In fact, this is what preoccupies the government. Mr. Speaker, this country is confronted with its biggest ever economic crisis. A crisis is a time to bring everyone together. It is a time to ask people for the best ideas. This is a time to work together and decide on a unified course of action, and then to carry it out. What does our government do? Nothing. Mr. Speaker, we are now looking at signs of recovery for global tourism. If our source markets get quick access to a vaccine, which it appears to be already, Mr. Speaker, and if Fiji plays its own card right, tourism may reopen fully in July or August 2021. But we all know, Mr. Speaker, that it's going to be a very different tourism industry next year. The industry must give our tourists the same experience or a better one. But the industry must also deal with the new world of health restrictions. It will also be a new world of cutthroat competition, because every tourist destination will try and get tourists to their shows and recover the market that they have lost. So, Mr. Speaker, what is our government doing? How is it working with our tourism industry? The answer again is zero. The tourism operators are in the dark. The hotel owners do not know what is happening. What has happened to the famous tourism response team announced by the government? Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what has happened. It has not met since August. Not met since August. It has not met for about 4 months now. In all of Fiji's tourism competitor countries, people are working together. The governments, the hoteliers, the airlines, the tour operators, they're all working together. They are planning for the reopening of global tourism. They are planning for the health issues, the marketing issues, the risk issues, the financial issues. And in Fiji, zero. No plans again. Mr. Speaker, the government talks grandly about its so-called COVID-safe recovery framework. They pretend that this is some grand strategy. But Mr. Speaker, I encourage every Fiji citizen to go onto the internet and read it. This is on government website. What is the so-called economic recovery framework? And to use the Honourable Attorney General's favourite phrase, what is the reality of the matter? It is a simple chart. It talks about when schools can reopen. It talks about how many people can sit in cafes and restaurants. It says market must be well ventilated. This, Mr. Speaker, is the so-called economic recovery framework. I'm talking about the economic recovery framework. I'm talking about the economic recovery framework. You don't know what it is. You worry about the health facilities.
Order.
That's another issue. This is the grand plan. This is the grand plan that the government is following. This is the grand plan that the government is following. New ideas? Zero. Targets? Zero. Timelines? Zero. Mr. Speaker, who remembers the so-called Bula bubble? For a while, this is all the government could talk about. All of a sudden, they've been hit by the reality of the matter. There will be no Bula bubble for many months. They talk about the Bula lane, but allowing a few years to come to Fiji will not solve our economic problems. Mr. Speaker, this is what you get with a government that refuses to listen. This is what happens with a government that pretends it has all the answers. What is the reality of the matter? The only ideas this government has ever had are about how to spend money. And because this government now has no money, Mr. Speaker, it has run out of ideas as well. Mr. Speaker, this government cannot be honest with the people. It does not have the courage to tell them things are going to get worse in the new year. It just continues to pretend that everything is normal. Mr. Speaker, it's now 14 years since the 2006 coup. And look at our country. Fiji is more divided, more indebted, more dictated than it ever has been. The Honourable Prime Minister and the Honourable Attorney General had promised us true democracy. What do we have? A parliamentary dictatorship. Even the other ministers, many of them do not know what's going on in the government. They don't even know the laws that have been passed, Mr. Speaker. I was told by somebody that one minister was asked about the citizenship law, the passport law, the immigration law. And the minister said, oh, I don't think that came to parliament. They don't even know what's going on in the government. They banned town and city council elections because they know that the opposition parties will win in that system. The Honourable Prime Minister promised an end to corruption, but corruption is worse than it ever has been in this country. How many of those government-controlled councils are being investigated by FICAG right now? How hard is it to build a swimming pool in Latoka, Mr. Speaker? And Mr. Speaker, what about the Bainimarama boom? Now when people talk about this Bainimarama boom, they are actually laughing. The national debt is really as big as our economy. The sugar industry is on its knees. The rates of violence against women and children are some of the highest in the world. So are our rates on health for hypertension, heart disease, diabetes. The health system is in tatters, Mr. Speaker. You know, I visited the Western Division, and the Minister for Health needs to concentrate on that. I was in Vanuatu. I looked at the Raketi Health Center, the Sayanga Health Center, the Wanikoro Health Center. These health centers are in a dilapidated condition. It doesn't require a lot of imagination and money to deal with that, Mr. Speaker. That's what the Minister for Health should concentrate. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Attorney General has reported as saying that Aspen Medical has been given more time to take over Ba and Latoka hospitals. We should be more honest, Mr. Speaker. The reason for the delay is that the hospitals are not fit to be taken over. The government cannot meet its promises to Aspen to give them working hospitals. I had warned in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, when the Honourable Attorney General brought that, this so-called public-private partnership. And I gave examples, Mr. Speaker, around Australia, around other countries, how these models have not been successful and how they have failed. We have an education system that is failing our young people. We have deepening poverty. Our cherished public institutions, the public service, the police, the constitutional officers, our parliament, are all politicized. and are bent to the will of few. The Honorable Prime Minister, I remember very well, promised that no one would sit on more than one government board. But look at the government boards today, Mr. Speaker. They are now pegged with the same people. They're being rotated around. Most of them are people who have contributed to the millions of dollars in the Fiji First bank account, I can see. And many of them would have benefited from it. But I'm not jealous. That's what you promised, Prime Minister. That's what you promised. You promised that nobody will sit in more than one board. I'm holding you on to your promise. I'm holding on to your promise. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, there is no vision for the future. This is a government, in my view, that seems to have given up, that makes it up as it goes along. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are calling on the people of Fiji to change all of this. We want a government in which everyone has the say. We want to combine the best ideas and the best people to deal with our pressing national problems, which is likely to get worse in the next few years, Mr. Speaker. The people of Fiji have no say in what happens except once in 4 years they vote. Mr. Speaker, we are calling for new leaders to step forward now, help us prepare for the 2022 election. We need young people, those who have led in their communities, in the fields of education, social work, business, professions. We need them to step forward. We want Fiji to prosper and our people to live in a fair and equal society where all are respected and taken care of. There must be change. Mr. Speaker, the National Federation Party has brought about momentous change in our beloved nation since its formation 57 years ago in 1963. We are 7 years older. We are 7 years older. Mr. Speaker, we are 7 years older than independent Fiji. 7 years older than independent Fiji. Which itself was a crusade led by the party's founder, late A.D. Patel, his able lieutenant, S.M. Koya, who became the first leader of the opposition, and the pioneering members of the Legislative Council that resulted in the end of 96 years of colonial rule in 1970. We have weathered many storms, Mr. Speaker, but our principal fortress is impregnable because we believe national interest must always be paramount and not subservient to personal and political advancement. We may have paid a very heavy price for not practicing political expediency, but we do not shake our principle for short-term gain. The country now, Mr. Speaker, is at a critical juncture, and we need practical solutions, not cosmetic ideas that cause long-term pain that we are now experiencing. The next general election, Mr. Speaker, some 2 years away, will be a defining moment in Fiji's history. Change is a fact of life, and genuine change will start with rejection of the bondage that people have with the so-called Fiji First government. Let us all march forward in this direction, Mr. Speaker. And people may ask, what would we do differently? What would we do differently? The answer is everything. Good government is not about making a law here or spending a bit of money there. Government is about honest, accountable leadership. It is about bringing the people of our country together. Good government is about working to combine the people's talent to solve our national problems. It is about bringing together a government and the opposition to reach agreement on long-term policies for long-term issues. Issues like our future economic direction, our key industries, and important social issues such as education, health, land tenure, and climate change. Order. You can yell as much as you can. Good government does not dictate to people. Good government supports people, Mr. Speaker. Good government enables them to work together, to find solutions at local level, then to come together and work on national problems. Good government uses the power of laws and public money to deliver the solutions our people have discussed and agreed. Our current government, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, has forgotten these simple, basic things. It only wants to dictate to people. Even the ministers, when they go and talk to the people, they actually dictate to them. You must do this. You must do that. You know, this is how they talk. and they look for opportunities,
Order.
and they look for opportunities to punish. They look for opportunities to punish their perceived enemies. And Mr. Speaker, they reward friends. That's the modus operandi. Punish the enemies, reward the friends. Without good government, Mr. Speaker, Fiji cannot progress. This is what must change. And Mr. Speaker, we are the party to change it. People on this side. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wish you a very happy and Merry Christmas.